All right, here we are back in Forge. I wanted to make a video about advanced variables since this is something that took me quite a bit to really grasp and understand exactly how and when to use them. So I think it might be pretty informative for people still trying to learn exactly how they work. Um, and I'll kind of explain the best I can, like certain situations for each kind. And we can kind of, I've got a couple situations, scenarios here for certain ones that will, I hope, make it easier for you to understand. Because once again, it was a concept that really it's not really out there. Like there's no way for you to know unless you just kind of know. There like are a few old tutorials, but um, my goal is to make this a lot simpler to learn here. So in this first brain here, we're talking about an object list variable. Um, and actually, before I explain individual types of variables, I will say on this list here, what variables advanced really are just a version of these same basic variables in this list. The only difference is you're able to reference them specifically with these identifiers, just like you would a custom event. You just reference a certain custom event. You reference a certain variable here after it's declared, and you can make changes to them by setting them. So basically, anytime you see set, think change. On player joined, we are setting this variable to make changes to it. Um, so with that said, we have declared an object list variable here. Um, and we identified it as players because we're putting together a list of players here that we are going to call on certain times. And we'll be calling it globally, which means we can access it in not just this brain, but any other brain. So if I were to make it local, then only this brain would be able to identify players as an object list variable. Meaning I could use that same identifier in a different brain and it would not reference this one. Um, and then object scoped, a little bit different. I'm sure you know that by now, which we will talk about. But for now, I want to explain this example, giving you an idea of how to use the object list variable. And these are just variable. I didn't use every single one, but kind of just the most common ones in my opinion. Just to because they all work the same. They're the same things. They're just different values for different game assets. So where was I? Yeah. So this scenario here, when a player joins, we've obviously already declared our object list variable. We are setting that variable. We're getting the player that joins and adding them to a list here. We're calling our same declared object list variable, which by the way, you do not need to identify the initial objects on this because it just kind of creates it when you start the game. So if I declare any sort of variable, it is just it's out there, and it's ready to access, if you will. Um, in this case, at least, there's a list that's created on game start technically because that's also when players are joined. this is like basically the same as when the game starts. It'll just take all the players that are queuing into the game initially. Those are the initial players that have joined. They get thrown into a list and get added to. Well, this is where we change then our object list variable by adding the players that have joined. So, and this will happen anytime a player joins as the game starts as well. They'll be added to this list, which again is being set and changed. And I just have it in this script here to print the name of the player that joins. That way it's just easy to kind of reference this script specifically to get an understanding. After a player joins and gets added to the list, this is like kind of like an idea of a script that you could use for this concept. So we branch into checking to see how many players we have. So basically what this is saying here is every time someone joins, we are calling that variable again. We get the object list variable that we have identified as players. Getting our list of players, we're getting its list size, and we're basically checking to see whether or not, well, what amount of people we have, basically. So do we have 4 people? That's what this is saying. So if we do, if A equals B, if we have 4 players in the game, if true, we'll be setting AI difficulty to legendary with the co-op scale difficulty to 4 players and not killing any squads. If we don't have 4 players, because again, it's going to check this first. So if not, we're going to check to see if we have greater than 4 players, if A is greater than B. If this condition is true, then we'll set AI difficulty legendary for however many players we have in the game. So if this number is 7, then it'll be true, and it will scale to 7 players here, difficulty-wise. If that's not true, if we have a different number of players, if it's less than 4, so 1, 2, or 3, then that'll be false. We branch into our final option, which is we'll be setting our AI difficulty down to heroic for however few players we have here. Same thing as up here. So that's how object list variables can be used for players. And again, players are dynamic objects. Anything that is interactable, can move around, can do things, that isn't just a wall or a floor that's static. That is a dynamic object. Anything that could do things. And hence able to be referenced as an object. And in this case, we're using players as objects, but not on an object scope, which again I will talk about in a minute. But then another little example here is when we interact with this little switch here, it will it will get this same list, the updated list, our variable list, and it will print every name on the list, which again are the players. And it's just gonna print my name. And again, it does it on game start too, like you just saw. But if there are other people, it would print them too. And that's because we're changing the list by adding players as they join. Now that you understand object list variables, let's see if we can help you understand a little more with a different kind. The most useful kind, in my opinion, number variables. You could do like anything with these. These are great. But I'm not going to run through like everything you can do. I'll give you just a pretty solid example of how they work here. So we declare a number variable, and we've declared it locally, so only this brain can access this number variable. So once you have declared it, you're able to do things with it. So what I've done here, I guess I'll start down here. When we activate, I've got two switches here. The scenario basically is we have two switches and they both kind of do the same thing, only you have to hit this switch once to get what we want, and we have to hit this switch twice to get what we want. Or you can hit the one that you need to hit twice once, and then if you want to hit that other one, this basically just jumps right to it. So that's the idea for this, and we're using number variables to do so. So when we hit the first switch, which we activate one time, we set our number variable, which has declared initial value of 0. It's going to start out with the number 0. And now we're changing it to 2. All right, and then once we do that, we're going to trigger a custom event, which I call check. And here it is right here. We are just checking to see what the number is, basically, to give us a result. So on that custom event check, if our number is 2, which is the number we want, then we're going to branch into for each player. So every player will receive splash, which says, it's going to say, so it gets the same number, 2 out of 2 completed. So basically with this UI message, you can also just plug in the value, the number value for this kind of template at least, which will then push splash for 3 seconds, 2 of 2 completed. And then once it does that on completion, it'll play a little audio cue, kind of just signifying that you've completed the task. And it's just going to play it on the player's position, which is the object in reference there. So this is just basically the end here. I reset it afterwards back to 0 so that you can test it again if you'd like. And you'll also be able to see your name printed on the feed. And I'll show you in a second. But the other scenario is if you hit the one that you need to hit twice, this switch here, it will, up top here, it will increment your number variable just by 1. So that means if I hit it and I'm at 0, I'll now be at 1. And if I hit it and I'm at 1, then I'll be at 2. So you can see why you need to hit it twice now. And you can refer with this node to any number variable, assuming your scope is the same, which it is. Local, number, same thing. So then we're going to trigger the same custom event when we hit that switch on custom event where we check to see what's going on. It's going to be false because we're only at a 1 at first. So when it's false, we'll also be pushing splash, but this time the message will read 1 out of 2. Because again, we're getting the variable as it is. In this case, it's going to be a 1. So it'll say 1 of 2 completed. And then nothing happens then on completion. You just need to hit the switch again to get you to a 2, which will do the same thing that it did when we hit the other switch. Now let me show you. So this one is 1. We only have to hit it 1 time. There we go. We get our cue completed, 2 of 2. Now it gets reset again. This one I have to hit twice, but it's the same thing. So 1 of 2 completed, nothing happens. There we go. 2 of 2, get the same result as when we hit that one. Now again, I can just hit this one once, and if I feel like hitting this one, sure, same result, 2 of 2 completed, and then I just have it reset. So, number variables. That is an example of something you can do with those. And again, there are just like endless things you can do with number variables. And they're also very useful on the object scope, which I will now talk about that. Yeah, so here we still have number variables on an object scope. Now this makes it a little bit more complex, but you can do so much with it, and it's great, and it's really not that hard to understand. Basically, before I talk about this scenario, I want to explain what the object scope is, at least for number variables. Well, it's always the same, but so we're declaring a number variable at object scope. So when this happens, anytime you declare an object scope variable, it gets every dynamic object in the game, including yourself. Players are dynamic objects because we can move, we can shoot, we can interact, we can do things. We're getting all other things that can break and do the same stuff, like vehicles. Setting a variable, but I don't care about other things. I don't care about ghosts. I don't care about warthogs. I don't care about whatever else is dynamic. So I've identified this number variable as player because it's going to be just focused on players. All right, so we've got an object scope variable focusing on players. When we interact with, so real quick, this scenario is you have to hit these in sequential order, A, B, and then C. You can't hit C first, you can't hit B first, you can't go B, A, etc. And I'll show you. And using objects scope number variables to do so. So when we interact with our little switch there, the first one in the sequence, we are going to get our number variable that we've declared initial value of 0 once again. So everything's going to start as 0, everything, including other objects that aren't players. But it's not going to matter because we're only worried about players. Since a player has to interact with an object, we're getting that player, making it our object, right? And you're only ever going to use this object input on any kind of advanced variable if the scope is object. If it's not, you're not worrying about this. You're worrying about value probably. Okay, so we have our player who is our object. Again, the player that interacted with the switch. We're plugging our value, our number, into this to compare once again. And again, I mean, it's declared initial value of 0, so once the player hits the first switch, it's comparing to see if it is 0. If it is, A equals B, condition is true, we are setting our number variable. We're not incrementing it, we're setting it at 1. So anytime that switch is hit, we are setting our value at 1 on that object. Okay, which is that player that hit the switch, just for him, nothing else. All other dynamic objects are still at 0. So then once we set that 1 for that one player, for every player in the game, for some reason I just wanted to do it that way, we're going to play an audio cue on that current player's position. Well, every player on equal team, I guess. I just threw this script together just for an example. But yeah, so this up here is just focusing on switch A there, number 1. And I also have, if you've already hit another switch, if A is greater than 0, like if you're already at 1 and you hit that switch, then it's just going to put a filter on that object, meaning you can't actually interact with it. Because if that were the case, you'd be set back down to 1, which we don't want for this example. Um, so that's that. Same concept moving forward. B, now we're at already, instead of initial value of 0, we're at 1, and it's going to do the same thing. Are we checking to see if it's 1? If it is, make it 2. We're changing again, changing it to 2, making it 2, whatever you want to call it, doing the same, following the same code as we did above. And then, if it's greater than, then we are setting the same filter there. So, and then once we get down here again, same thing, just checking to see if it's at a 2 now, which is the goal. But this time, there doesn't need to be really any other scenarios, because there will be filters already in place if it's not the case. Let me explain by showing you. But hopefully you understand that by now. Object scope variables once again. So we have to hit A first. Let me show you. You can't hit B first. I have you do not have this. That's the splash that gets pushed to you if you don't have the right number variable. So A, we get our sound. We're good. I can't interact with it again because I now have that filter on there. I can't jump right to C either. I don't have this. I have to hit B next. Alright, we get the same sound. Again, can't go back to A. Can't do B again. I have to hit C. There we go. Completed. My name was printed to the feed. And just like before, I have it so that it resets back down to a 0 number at the end for my person's number variable. So that's an object scoped. Essentially just focusing on the one thing, in this case players, the one player who is activating switches in the game, not all players. That's object scoped. That we're gonna just leave for now. I didn't do that, but that's gonna be for like weapon type variables and equipment type variables, which again it's all the same stuff. It's just what is the variable in question. They just have different inputs and stuff. Here, okay, yeah, so not too common of one, but one that's definitely useful for the types of maps that I make, which are campaign style maps. A Boolean variable. Now, that probably sounds scary. What is a Boolean? A Boolean. I call it Boolean. Boolean variable. A Boolean is basically a variable in scripting that provides a scenario in which one of two things can be the case. So, if an if statement, is it this or is it that? Here, I'm explaining this by demonstrating two like area monitors here. So like just like you would in a campaign style map, on object entered area, do thing. That's our script here. But on this one, we don't have a Boolean variable declared, set, anything like that. Here we do, and I'll show you why we need that. So here's our normal one without it. When, in this case, I just made it, normally you do get as player, but get is AI here. I'm gonna spawn 2 grunts. If that's true, we're gonna print the Boolean to the kill feed. So basically for whatever AI enters, we're gonna print true. We're doing the same thing on the other side, only we've declared Boolean variable, and after we branch, we're making this a condition that if we're calling our variable here, and then once we get it, if it's the first person, the first thing, first AI, then we are setting it then false so that it can't trigger any more times. It is just going to trigger one time and print only one true value. So a lot of times in campaign style maps, multiple people enter an area at once and then it triggers just like over here. However many are in there will print, and I'll show you. Okay, so here we haven't, again, it's just a normal area monitor without Boolean set up. 2 grunts entered the area and it printed 2 debugs saying true. So, you don't normally want that in a campaign style map, because if that was 2 players, it would for each player trigger that whole script. Here it can't do that. It's going to do the same thing over there, spawn 2 grunts, but it only print 1 true value because we have set and declared a Boolean variable, which will not let the script trigger anymore after it's set to false value, because once we have 1, it will get it, which the initial value is true, and then we set it to false because it won't be able to continue after that, if that makes sense. But yeah, very, very useful in campaign scripts. I just wanted to include this here for that reason. But that's essentially all I have set up right now. I will be adding more for as many variables as I can, and publishing this for people to, if you want to just copy and paste these brains or just learn yourself here. That's the idea for this. So I hope this helped at least a little bit. If it didn't, if you still have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help as always. So thanks for watching. Have a good day.